You know the scene. Tony Montana stands at the top of his mansion staircase, machine gun in both hands, bullets tearing through him, screaming that he is going to live forever. He goes down in a blaze of glory, defiant, cinematic, immortal on screen. It is one of the most famous endings in movie history. Now, here is the real ending. January 25th, 1947, Palm Island, Florida. A 8-year-old man is dying in the master bedroom of a 1-4-room mansion on a private island in Biscayne Bay. His wife May sits at his bedside, holding his hand. He does not always know who she is. He calls out for people who are not in the room. He holds conversations with invisible guests. He cannot walk without assistance. His pupils are dilated. His jaw is set rigid. Convulsions had been coming every few minutes before the medication slowed them. A year earlier, 2 physicians examined him and submitted an official report to the court, concluding that this man has the mental capacity of a 1-2-year-old child. At 8:30 inches the evening, his heart stops. He dies in his bed, confused, diminished at 48 years old, surrounded by family who have been watching him disappear for years. His name is Alphonse Gabriel Capone, and he is the real Tony Montana, not metaphorically, not loosely. When Brian De Palma directed Scarface in 1983 and Oliver Stone wrote the screenplay, a script Stone wrote in Paris while battling his own cocaine addiction, Tony Montana was a deliberate fictional reconstruction built on the bones of Al Capone's actual life, the immigrant who arrives with nothing, the violent climb through a criminal underworld, the empire built on a product everyone wants but cannot legally buy, the corruption of an entire city's power structure, the paranoia, the isolation, the fall. They changed the setting from Chicago to Miami. They changed the product from bootleg alcohol to cocaine. They made the man Cuban instead of Italian and called him Tony Montana instead of Al Capone. And they gave him a death that was dramatic and cinematic and completely false, because the real ending of the real man's real story was too dark and too sad and too human for a Hollywood film to use. The film cost $37 million to make, grossed $66 million worldwide, and ranked only 16th at the box office in 1983. It became a classic, not in theaters but over decades of home video, its 20th anniversary DVD selling over 2 million copies in its first week alone. This is the story Tony Montana was based on, and it is more brutal than anything on that screen. January 17th, 1899-95, Navy Street, Brooklyn, New York. Tony Montana arrives in Miami by boat with nothing. Al Capone arrives in Chicago by train from Brooklyn with nothing. Both men are starting from zero in a city that does not know them yet. The real man is born in a Brooklyn tenement where the rent is $4 a month. The walls have no insulation and there is no hot water and no bathroom. His parents, Gabriel and Teresa, have come from Castellamare de Stabia, a small city south of Naples, with the same nothing that brought every immigrant family to New York at the turn of the century. His father is a barber. His mother takes in sewing. There are 9 children in the apartment on Navy Street. Al is the 4th. He is a smart kid. B grades through 6th grade at public school, 7 on Adams Street. Enough talent in the classroom that his teacher, Sadie Mulvaney, remembers him specifically. Sullen, she says, physically large for his age, with a temper that moved faster than his judgment. He holds on until he is 14 years old. Then a teacher disciplines him in a way he finds intolerable. He hits her in the face, and he is expelled from school permanently. He never goes back. He is done with the system. He is going to build his own. Tony Montana has a line in the film that became famous. He says, "The one thing in this world that gives orders is balls." Al Capone would have agreed with every word of it. He drops out, works odd jobs, candy store, bowling alley, munitions factory, paper cutting shop, and hates every one of them with the white-hot intensity of a boy who knows in the way that certain boys know from very early on that he was not designed for someone else's schedule and someone else's ceiling. He finds his way into the street gangs around Park Slope and Red Hook, the Junior 40 Thieves, the Bowery Boys, the 5 Points Gang in Lower Manhattan. He is moving upward through the criminal infrastructure of New York the same way Tony Montana moves upward through the cocaine infrastructure of Miami, through violence, through audacity, and through the recognition of older men who see in him something they can use. The man who sees it in Al Capone is Johnny Torrio. 17 years older, slight, composed, one of the most sophisticated criminal minds of his generation. He runs a social club in Brooklyn. He becomes Capone's mentor the way Frank Lopez and later Sosa are structures of power that Montana navigates in the film. Except Torrio is real. And his specific lesson to Capone, the one that shapes everything, is that violence is a tool with a specific appropriate application. You do not use it randomly. You use it strategically, precisely when it produces the specific result you need and not before. Capone learns this lesson. He also learns it imperfectly. He gets his first real job at the Harvard Inn, a Coney Island bar and brothel run by Frankie Yale, bartender, bouncer. The kind of work that puts a large, physically confident young man in rooms where other large, physically confident men are drunk and looking for reasons. One evening in 1917, a man named Frank Galluccio comes in with his sister Lena and a date. Capone makes a comment to Lena at the bar. What exactly he says is lost. The accounts agree that it is loud and that it is said more than once and that it is the kind of comment a 9-year-old with no restraint makes when he thinks his size is its own protection. Galluccio asks him to take it back. Capone refuses. Galluccio draws a small knife and slashes him across the left cheek before Capone can move. 3 parallel cuts deep, running from the ear toward the jaw. They heal badly. Now look at Tony Montana. The first thing you notice about Tony Montana is the scar on his face. It is his defining visual feature, his signature, the detail that makes him immediately recognizable. He wears it without apology. Al Capone hated his scars for the rest of his life. He told everyone who asked that they came from combat wounds in France during the First World War. He was never in the military. He had never been to France. He had never been within 3,000 miles of France. He was a Brooklyn kid who got slashed in a Coney Island bar by a man whose sister he had insulted. And the lie he built over those 3 scars is the clearest possible window into who he actually was. A man who could order 7 murders before breakfast and was terrified that people would know how he got cut. When anyone called him Scarface, they regretted it. In 1919, Torrio calls Capone to Chicago. He is managing the South Side operation of Big Jim Colosimo brothel, gambling, political protection, and he can see prohibition coming like a freight train. The Volstead Act goes into effect in January 1920. Alcohol is illegal. Every person in America who drinks, and there are millions of them, needs somewhere to get it. The demand is not going to disappear because the law says it should. The supply is going to come from somewhere. Torrio wants to be that somewhere. Colosimo, fat and comfortable and newly married to a young singer, is not interested in expanding. In May 1920, Colosimo is shot dead in the lobby of his own restaurant. Nobody is charged. Now think about Tony Montana. He arrives in Miami. He works for Frank Lopez. He sees what Lopez has and understands that Lopez is not using it correctly. He takes it. He builds something bigger. Al Capone arrives in Chicago. He works for Johnny Torrio. He sees what Torrio has and understands that together they can build something that makes Colosimo's operation look like a corner store. They build it. The bootlegging network stretches from Canadian distilleries through Chicago to customers across the Midwest. The breweries, the speakeasies, the distribution network enforced by armed men in armored cars. At its peak in 1927, the Chicago outfit under Capone generates an estimated $100 million per year, equivalent to over $1.5 billion in today's dollars, $60 million from gambling. $25 million from bootlegging, $10 million from brothels, $5 million from other rackets. He employs an estimated 1,000 gunmen. He controls the police. He controls the mayor of Cicero, an entire Chicago suburb, so completely that during the 1924 elections, his men drive to polling stations and physically assault voters at gunpoint who are not supporting his chosen candidates. Tony Montana has a scene where he sits at a restaurant table and surveys everything he has built and says he wants the world and everything in it. Al Capone sat in a suite at the Lexington Hotel in Chicago that functioned as both his personal headquarters and his public court, and received politicians, judges, police chiefs, and businessmen who came to pay their respects the way guests come to the Corleone compound in a different film entirely. He threw parties for 2,000 people. Time magazine put him on the cover. He was simultaneously the most famous and the most powerful private citizen in the United States. He also opened a soup kitchen during the Depression at 935 South State Street. It served breakfast, lunch, and dinner to an average of 2,200 Chicagoans every day at a cost of $300 daily, around $5,300 in today's money. On Thanksgiving 1930, the kitchen fed 5,000 people in a single day, prompting the Chicago Tribune to run the headline, 120,000 meals served by Capone Free Soup Kitchen. Tony Montana in the film has his famous line about not killing civilians and not killing children. Capone had a version of the same code which he violated repeatedly when it suited him. But the public performance of it, the soup kitchens, and the neighborhood generosity built him the same kind of loyalty in his community that the film builds for Montana in Little Havana. What the film cannot show you, what no film could show you and still get made, is what was happening inside Al Capone's body during all of this. Around 1919, working in the brothel, Torrio managed and using their services regularly. Al Capone contracts syphilis. He knows the initial symptoms are unmistakable. He says nothing. He does not see a doctor. He is 19 years old and already building a reputation built entirely on physical power and the fear he commands in other people. And syphilis is a disease of weakness and carelessness. And the exposure of it would be worse to a man like him than almost any other public admission. So he buries it. He tells no one. He takes nothing for it. And the bacteria Treponema pallidum, one of the most insidious pathogens in medical history, begins its slow, invisible 20-year project of destroying his nervous system. This is the detail that the movie cannot give Tony Montana. In the film, Montana is cocaine. He piles it on his desk and buries his face in it, and by the end, his own product is destroying him. It is a clean metaphor for how power corrupts itself. The real version is worse because it is not metaphorical. The thing destroying Capone is not his product. It is a disease he contracted when he was 19 years old and was too proud to treat, moving through his brain while he builds his empire invisible and relentless, working alongside him through every decision and every murder and every triumph for 20 years. February 14th, 1929. 10:30 inches the morning. 2122. North Clark Street, Lincoln Park, Chicago. The SMC Cartage Company garage. 7 men inside, all connected to Bugs Moran's North Side gang, waiting on a delivery of stolen Canadian whiskey. Among them, Frank and Pete Gusenberg, Moran's 2 most feared enforcers. Albert Kachelik, Adam Heyer, Albert Weinshank, and John May, a mechanic who has brought his pet dog Highball to the garage that morning and tied him to a car axle, and Dr. Reinhard Schwimmer, a 29-year-old optometrist with no criminal record, who comes to this garage regularly because he loves being around gangsters, loves the proximity to the danger, considers these men exciting company. He is in the wrong place at the worst possible moment in the history of that building. Bugs Moran is supposed to be there. He is the primary target. He arrives late, approaches the garage from the street, sees a police car parked outside, and turns around. He walks to a nearby diner and gets a coffee. He tells an associate he passes on the street to avoid the garage. It looks like there is a raid. He is drinking that coffee when two men in Chicago police uniforms and two men in civilian clothes walk through the garage door. They tell everyone to face the wall. The 7 men comply. They are used to police raids. They know the procedure. They do not know that the police car belongs to Capone's operation. They do not know the uniforms are not real. They do not know any of this until the Thompson submachine guns come out. 70 rounds, 2 Thompsons, 1 sawed-off shotgun. 6 men die before they hit the floor. Frank Gusenberg takes 14 bullets and stays alive long enough to reach the hospital. A detective leans over him and asks who shot him. He says, "No one shot me." He dies 3 hours later, still not having named anyone. The dog Highball is found at his axle, alive, unharmed, howling in a pitch that brings neighbors into the street before anyone realizes what has happened inside. Highball is eventually put down by police. He never recovers from whatever he witnessed. Moran gets the news in the diner. He makes the statement that defines the moment and follows Capone forever. Only Capone kills like that. Capone is in Florida. He has a perfect alibi. Nobody is ever charged. In Scarface, Tony Montana does not directly order mass killings of rivals in public spaces during his ascent. The film keeps his violence more personal, more immediate. Al Capone ordered the coordinated massacre of 7 men in a garage, had it carried out by a team in fake police uniforms, and was 3 states away when it happened. The scale and the architecture of the real violence make the film look restrained. The fall comes not from a rival with more guns, but from a man with a briefcase, Frank Wilson, Special Agent, IRS Intelligence Unit. He spends 3 years examining every financial record connected to the Capone operation he can find. He cannot prove murder. He cannot prove bootlegging directly because no document in the organization bears Capone's name. What he can prove is that money flowed to Capone, and Capone never paid taxes on it. The argument is not complicated. You earned this money. You did not report it. That is a federal crime regardless of how the money was earned. In June 1931, Capone is indicted on 22 counts of tax evasion. He tries to negotiate a plea deal, believing he will receive 2.5 years. The judge rejects it from the bench in open court. Capone's lawyers attempt to tamper with the jury. The judge switches entire jury pools between courtrooms at the last minute. Capone is convicted. 11 years, a $50,000 fine. $215,000 in back taxes plus interest. He is 32 years old. Tony Montana goes out on that staircase with a machine gun. Al Capone goes to federal prison because he did not pay his taxes. Atlanta Penitentiary first, where his connections still work well enough to make prison manageable. Then Alcatraz opens in 1934, specifically to remove men like him from any environment where their connections still function. The island works. The syphilis, which has been working without interruption since 1919, begins producing visible results that no amount of money or influence can manage. He dresses in a winter coat inside his heated cell, shivering from cold that is not there. He is stabbed by a fellow inmate with a pair of scissors in 1936. The man who once needed 1,000 armed men to protect his operations cannot stop one inmate with a pair of scissors. He gets into a fight with another prisoner that involves throwing feces. He plays banjo in the prison band on Sunday afternoons. They call themselves the Rock Islanders. Every Sunday, the man who appeared on the cover of Time magazine plays banjo for an audience of federal prisoners who no longer fear him at all. His official diagnosis in 1938, neurosyphilis. The bacteria that entered his body in a Chicago brothel in 1919 has spent 20 years destroying his brain tissue and has now produced a form of dementia that is permanent and irreversible. He is released in 1939. He receives penicillin in 1942, one of the first civilian patients in America to receive it, but it is 23 years too late to undo the damage. In 1946, two court-appointed physicians examine him and write in their official report, Alphonse Capone has the mentality of a 1-2-year-old child. At the time of his death, his personal estate is valued at approximately $7 million, around $100 million in today's dollars. His grandniece, Deirdre Marie Capone, later said he had buried a hidden fortune but was too delusional by then to remember where. He goes to Palm Island. He fishes. He plays cards. He calls out for people who are not in the room. He holds conversations with guests that nobody else can see. On January 25th, 1947, his heart stops. He is 48 years old. Tony Montana dies the way every movie gangster dies, loudly, violently, cinematically on his feet with a weapon in his hands, refusing to go quietly. Al Capone dies in a bed in Florida talking to invisible guests with the mind of a 1-2-year-old while his wife holds his hand. That is the difference between the movie and the man. And the man is the one who actually existed. Everything in that film, the immigrant with nothing, the violent climb, the empire built on a product the law banned but the public demanded, the corruption of an entire city, the paranoia, the isolation, the fall, came from one real life, Alphonse Gabriel Capone. Brooklyn, Chicago, Alcatraz, Palm Island, the scars on his face that he lied about until he died. The disease he was too proud to treat at 19 that destroyed him at 48. The massacre in a garage while he sat in Florida with an alibi. The soup kitchens, the banjo, the 1-2-year-old mind in the body of the man who once ran the world. They changed the name to Tony Montana and gave him a better ending. But the real story was already there, and it was always more brutal than anything they put on screen.